I wouldn't call myself a source. I would call myself a purveyor of information that is getting you to go to the source of said information. So when I do a Jimmy Makes Science Simple, I'm reading from a study. And so I'm giving you the reference of the study. I'm giving you my reading of it and my interpretation. And then you go look at it and you do the same for yourself. And applying it to the masks, you can go in and look at some of the things I talk about. You can look them up. I think part of the problem here, why people are having trouble thinking clearly, at least on this issue, is there's certain kinds of information that are being allowed to be heard, and then certain other kinds of information that are not being allowed to heard. Plus, you've got people from high who are going this and then opposite of this within a span of just a few weeks, months. And that confuses people, and that convolutes the ability to think clearly.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like logic does not like, logic likes simplicity. It's got to break everything back down into simplicity or it won't work. Complex systems can't be jammed through a logic structure.
And people interpret the exact same language in totally different ways. So words will come across to one person very differently than they will come across to another person, which is another little wrinkle in this thing of trying. Clearly, people can't do it because they're hearing what they want to hear based on pre-biases and things like that. So that's another aspect of this. I hope this is interesting for people watching and listening because
this is a technical discussion about logic.
Yes. Yeah.
If you want that, great. This is what it is. There's other ways of doing this, but this is just, if you want to use logic, if you like trying to be a rational human being, this is some training in it. That's all the offer is.
So what else is there? I know you're saying that logic has its limitations. What are the other alternatives?
Oh, there's lots of them. Story is a way of doing this. Religions and supernaturalism as explanations are ways of doing this. And you see a lot of these things fighting out in the world.
Yes.
Logic is just a very organized system. Most people don't get trained to logic.
No.
So they end up using kind of pseudo logic. And that's the nature of the book that I'm writing is like, hey, America, you're in very complicated waters culturally and modern life. And you've got poor training in pseudo logic. That's a bad combination. You probably want to up your training so that you can think through these systems and get to reliable information. But it's not easy. I can't make this a consumption product.
Right. Give an example of pseudo logic in reference, since we were talking about it, in reference to the math. What's a pseudo logic that you think is running rampant out there?
Okay, so one of the things that you do, I mentioned earlier, ethos is character. So if all this stuff is complicated over here, like we were talking about with YouTube, too many words, too many people, too many things, you can't vet the content. Can't do it, no matter what you try. So we move over to a second system, which is let's vet the source. So are you a better source than Fauci?
Well, Fauci goes back and forth on a lot of things, and so I don't think either one of us is a great source, if I'm being honest. I'm not a virologist, he is, but then he's one that unfortunately has done more to confuse than to clear up. I try to speak very clearly when I speak. You may not agree, but at least I speak clearly, but I don't have the authority. So I think we kind of both are valid for that reason.
So this is what
a source, Dan, that's the thing. I'm a purveyor of information that says, here's the information, you go vet it out a little more, look up people, I'm giving you something to think about. And then there's the social media and YouTube and different ones, like the interview you did with Emily, they don't want certain things to get out there. And so that takes away this ability for people to make.
So let me slow you down because you're making lots of subclaims in these conversations.
Sure. I do that.
I asked you a yes or no question. Like
okay.
What's an either or? Who is a better source, Dr. Fauci or Jimmy Moore?
Well, that's not yes or no. That's either or. Well, I don't think it's either one of us, to be honest.
Well, we're playing logic now. We're not playing Jimmy Moore dialogue. Okay. In logic, you have to make decisions. And so sometimes you make those decisions, based on evidence and all these kind of things in order to try to get to truth. But just objectively, if we're looking at this on facts, on ethos, which is just credibility, it doesn't mean he's correct. It just means he has better ethos than you, better credibility.
Who was a better man, Hitler or Mussolini? Like it's almost, no, you don't know, because it's almost giving credibility where none is deserved, because both are bad.
You're dodging, and in logic.
No,
I get it.
I'm having the conversation because you're presenting with something. You're trying to tell me, you're trying to get me to say Dr. Fauci, and I can't do it because the man, I mean, obviously, okay, since you said ethos, from an ethos perspective, it's obviously Dr. Fauci.
Sure. So stop.
What?
We're playing logic. I'm just having you play logic.
I'm having fun. Let's go.
This is what they do to you in courtrooms, by the way.
Oh, I'm aware.
They don't want you to ramble. They don't want you to go into sub-issues. They don't want you to go into context and all this stuff. They want to control things so that they can get to the conclusion that they need you to get to. And that is logic, okay? Yeah. So there's nothing wrong with doing dialogue and being all over the place. That's a natural human communication system. It doesn't yield very well.
Yeah.
So just on ethos, and this is not whether he's correct or not.
Okay.
It's just who has more credibility. The guy who's been working in virology or whatever 40 years, has a med degree, did the Ebola crisis, has done this all over the world, talked to the best experts everywhere, has the best resources and everything else. Or Jimmy Moore in his...
No, Jimmy's never making any claims that he's better ethos-wise than Dr. Fauci.
Okay, so we've now found a logic good. Like we've done something with logic. We've looked at options, we've looked at evidence, and we've made a decision on, we've got one true fact now. Tony Fauci has better credibility than Jimmy Moore.
From an ethos perspective, yes.
Yes, exactly. And so what a qualifier does in logic is it shrinks things down so you can get it small enough to make factual statements. If you try to expand it back out, so you take it broad instead of very narrow, then you can't make true statements. So all we've done, and this is not to compromise you or anything that you're doing, is found one true statement. That took us, what, 15 minutes?
I think it was axiomatic, to be honest with you, Dan. Anybody would say Dr. Fauci would be, at least from a figurehead perspective.
That's not true at all. Like people have completely slandered and denigrated his ethos. They would go with you.
No. I'm talking about people that are thinking logically, like we're talking about here today. Every single person that would think logically, almost all of them, would conclude that Dr. Fauci is far more of an ethos, I guess, persona than anybody else on this, because he's the guy that's been out in front of this from the very beginning, and it, like you said, been in this for decades. Nobody's doubting that. I think the problem with what we're talking about here is the division is partly because of this ethos saying things on both sides of things like masks, that it has made people distrustful of him. Even though he has the moxie, he has the ethos, all the things, he has not endeared himself to the people that might be more persuaded by what he would have to say if he would be consistent in that message.
Sure. So again, you've made 15, 20, 25 claims.
That's what I do, brother.
That's what everybody does when they get into oral logic back and forth, okay? That is the nature of human communication. It's just a flow of claims. But if you're going to use logic and rationality, you can't just flow past you can't throw all those logs into the river and not investigate each one, because you're going to end up, it's a bad process. You're going to end up with bad outcome because you have not followed rationality. So one of the things you said in there was anybody would give Dr. Fauci better credibility. So That's a claim, and
As
true.
the qualifier is someone thinking rationally. The vast majority of people thinking rationally, thinking clearly, like you and I are talking about, applying logic, almost all of those people would think that he is. Like, I'm not claiming that I would be, because that would be silly from an ethos perspective.
But if you understand ethos, though, and this is why rhetoric is so useful, ethos is a wheel. There are a lot of slices. It's like a pie or a wheel turning. And so there's a lot of slices in there of different types of ethos. So he's got expertise ethos.
Yes.
He's got the degree. He's got the experience. He's worked in this particular thing. But the thing you immediately moved over to was like his morality ethos or his political ethos or his communication ability.
Because it matters.
Well, not necessarily. Like if you're just wanting expertise, none of that matters at all.
It
But
does to a lot of people.
So ethos is a wheel. I can just move you to different areas in that wheel. And now we're talking about a different form of ethos. So do you have better morality ethos than Dr. Fauci?
Hell yeah.
Do you?
Yes.
Well, give me your evidence.
Because I'm consistent. When I say things based on me vetting out information, I've done this for a very long time, not as long as Dr. Fauci. I was in diapers when he started doing his work, so that's a long time.
And you still are. Hey.
Hey, yeah, this is why these kinds of discussions, and it's why I wanted you on today. By the way, this is great. I hope you guys are enjoying this between me and Dan. And Dan, he pushes me, I push him back. That's
my point is, I don't care what the outcome is. I'm working on process. I don't care if you believe that masks should be won over your ear hole.
But the problem is, this is where we are. This is where the contentiousness is. So back to your question. Yes, I feel like I have better character than Dr. Fauci because he's been all over the board. You can't trust him because he's like the worst politician that says this and then the opposite of this and says, see, I was right all along. He can claim that I had the right answer all along, but he also had the wrong answer all along. What you hear out of my voice and people like Keith Norris you were talking about earlier, we're consistent. It's like, okay, we've vetted the information. Here's what we see. And you don't see us really veer off the path of what we've been sharing. Whereas Dr. Fauci, he's kind of done, that's all he's done.
So inconsistency is a moral flaw in your...
Yeah. Yes. In this case with the masks, because early on he was like, no, they might stop a droplet or two, and then 2 months later, oh my gosh, everybody needs a mask. And 6 months later, oh, everybody needs a triple mask. And it just became this, what's he going to say next kind of thing. And I think once you lie, which when you flip-flop on things, consistently keep flip-flopping, you're a liar. That gets you pegged character-wise as a liar. People can't trust anything you say, even if what you're saying in the moment is correct.